Good afternoon. And the Hillsborough County Commission on Human Trafficking Board meeting on November 21st, 2024 is now called to order. I'd like to thank our board members and staff and the public for attending today. Ms. Monteleone, could you please take the roll and determine if we have a quorum?
Certainly, sir. Alex Petrolak. Beverly Molinecki. Chair Klug.
Here.
Chief Judge Sabella.
Here.
Ashley Gehrig.
Here.
Major Timko.
Here.
Your new rank, Member Shriver? Sergeant Shriver.
Here.
Thank you. You mentioned you had a new one, but you didn't tell me what it was. Commissioner Cepeda? Dottie Groover Skipper?
I'm here.
Captain Carlisle?
I'm here.
Are you online?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. I just thought you would be here in person, so. Okay, thank you very much. Jennifer Glaister?
Here.
Chief Cavotier? Public Defender Holt? Gina Dickerson? Stephanie Kozalka?
Here.
Thank you. School Board Member Perez? Misty LaPierre? Here. Detective English?
Here.
Santiago Carrata? Officer Pascali? Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Great. And it really helps having alternates as well to be able to get those quorums. So as I mentioned a couple times in these meetings, we've been able to accomplish a lot since we've had the alternates and be able to vote and get those quorums. In the past, we've had a number of issues to try to obtain a quorum, especially after COVID. It was a little hangover from that, trying to get people to attend in person. We've already, in the agenda, we have minutes from the July meeting. We've already approved those. At the next meeting, we'll approve the meetings from the August meeting. So I'm going to go over to the collaborative labs discussion and appreciate everyone for attending that and your input, setting those goals and strategies. And so I think you all have a copy of the summary of what we accomplished at that meeting and back in September. And I'm not sure if you have any comments on that. If not, I can walk through the different goals and strategies, especially for the people who are not in attendance, so we can review those and what went into those. Does anyone have any comments, first of all, about the session, the labs?
Chair Klug,
Yes.
I do. I know the very first one, Strategy 1, Education of Local Justice Partners in Hillsborough County by key members of Tyler Court and Sarasota Justice Partners. I would like to see that also with discussions with members of the Veterans Treatment Court and other justice partners, perhaps in Hillsborough County as well, to be a part of that.
Any comment about that as far as go back and what that goal was and the strategies? Just to recap on that. Do you want to talk about that in somewhat?
Well, yeah, I know this body has had, gosh, I don't even know how long ago it was, but retired Colonel D.J. Reyes with the Veterans Treatment Court came and made a formal presentation about the similarities of a Veterans Treatment Court and setting up, for lack of a better word, a human trafficking treatment court, and how that model is just so incredibly established all over the nation, and how that model could be used in a human trafficking treatment court. So I just want us to, since he's done a formal presentation, we've talked about it for a long period of time, we have individuals and organizations in Hillsborough County that can also speak to this. I would just like to have those individuals included in this strategy.
Okay. Any comments, additional comments about that? With respect to the other goals and strategies, any additional comments? Like I said, if you like, I can go through each one of those, or you can read those. Would you prefer if I go through each one of those?
I think it would be helpful to go through each
Yeah.
one.
So just for law enforcement, the goal was continue to increase training and education of law enforcement officers in the community at large, while also implementing legal procedures and programs to assist victims. And we have, so just going back to, if you weren't at the lab, we broke into groups, and each of the groups provided, goals and strategies. And so now you can add some maybe additional comments and strategies on that, but we had some great participation on those issues. With respect to that goal, there were a couple strategies. One is implement a human trafficking diversion program, utilizing best practices learned from other programs to reduce or stop the revolving door of victimization. And the Veterans Treatment Court was given an example. Next one was intelligence-driven partnerships with law enforcement and justice partners, with information sharing with law enforcement agencies and trusted NGOs. Next two are awareness and education for the community on what human trafficking is and what to contact regarding suspected human trafficking. And the last one, increased funding for law enforcement specified for human trafficking training and technology. So these are things, we had some funding that went unspent this past year, and so we're also looking at how can we fund these different programs as well. So this is going to be playing into that as far as the different strategies. Does anyone else have any comments about those strategies?
Mr. Chair, while you're,
Yes.
while the members are pondering a response to your prompt, I do want to acknowledge that our county attorney is on WebEx, so if anyone has any questions or needs to clarify anything with Ms. Cromartie-Mincy, she is available, and that we now have Stephanie, Officer Pascali here. So I know that the chief judge needs to leave a little bit early, so you will not lose a quorum
Great.
when he leaves the room, because we only had a margin of one. But now you're good. Thank you.
And it's Grover Skipper mentioned about the options court type program that I know created some controversy in the past, and I'm
It
not sure
has.
if, I remember bringing it up as a committee chair many years ago, and we had a lot of comment about it. So if anyone wants to comment on that issue, I know that's something that's been talked about quite a bit over the years.
For 6 years at
Yes,
least,
yes.
yes.
And then going about funding that as well, how we get that program started. I think there's apparently a real need for that, as I heard from a number of people, especially at the lab, et cetera. I'm not sure if anyone else has any comments about that. Okay. Yes.
If I could comment, I would just
Absolutely,
say,
thank you.
we are definitely in support of it and in support of Ms. Why- I
Dottie.
just call you Dottie.
Dottie,
Yeah, I don't
yes.
know why I'm struggling over that. Okay, with Dottie's idea of bringing together, law and, I can't talk today, I'm sorry. Bringing together court professionals in the Hillsborough County area to discuss the various models, but how much it is needed in our community and how much we've seen it be effective in other areas as well. I think the model is something that we could totally work out, but just to see it moving forward would be fantastic for survivors in our community.
Okay.
Agreed. And what would be the next step to move forward?
Yeah, I think that we probably need to have another, meeting, just maybe addressing that issue. I'm not sure, Judge, if you have any
Sure.
comments on that as well.
Yeah, sure, because we've had some conversations even recently. It necessitates the involvement of a lot of players. There needs to be someone from the state attorney's office involved, the public defender's office. So it is a conversation that we are continuing to have with all of those players. And we have had conversations, in fact, very recently. So we're doing, I will let you know that the court, the chief judge, is not against it and am willing to dedicate, at the very least, a docket where we can divert those cases. Oh, I apologize. But we need to have definite parameters of what cases go there. And the agencies that are involved, the criminal justice agencies, the state attorney, the prosecutor, the defense, need to have personnel to dedicate to that docket. So those are the things that we're struggling with and working, all trying to work together and move towards that.
Okay, thank you. That's good news. Thank you.
Okay. Now, as far as bringing this to the next meeting, do you think that's something we could accomplish? Would we have time for that? Or do you think we need more time, Judge, perhaps to put this together for a presentation and trying to move this forward?
Let me defer to Julie Holt, who is
I
our
don't like the
public
look on her
defender.
face.
Well, no, I mean, realistically, the meetings that we've all been having have been with myself and the chief judge and Ms. Lopez and a couple of other people, but you have a brand-new public defender coming in January, and I feel like, it'd be a little too soon.
Okay.
I agree. I didn't want to say that. I wanted to let her comment on that.
Well, I mean, that's the face, it's, I know what it's like to come into a brand-new office with 200 employees, a bunch of cases that are pending, things that she's got to figure out. She's got to do her own organizational, she's got to do her own organizational part of life. I know that she's already designated Ms. Monteleone has already made the arrangements for Ms. McLean to be obviously the member of the commission, and she's already designated an alternate. And that person, I don't know, have they been approved, Ms. Monteleone, yet? Or?
No, the Board of County Commissioners has a policy that they don't approve any additions or confirm anyone to a board or council authority committee before an election. So now that the election is passed, we'll schedule a confirmation for the next meeting. Well, for a future meeting. I won't guarantee it'll be the next one.
And I can at least say this, because I know that she has said it to me. She doesn't have any intentions of making any significant changes over the first 90 days, and that's because she intends to learn. And so I think that that's going to be something that you have to kind of sit back on. I will tell you that we will, we're doing a transition, and so part of the transition will be that we will let her know about the meetings that we've had, not only with the chief judge, but with Judge Esrig, the meetings that we've had with Children's Network in terms of identifying certain youth, because we think that they're, in the juvenile arena, we think that there's a captured audience of children that we believe should be involved in this particular type of a initiative. So, and both offices know who we're talking about. Our providers probably know exactly who we're also talking about. So those types of things are in place. But resources, it's going to be up to Ms. McLean to determine the resources aspect of it. I've tried not to commit that part of it. I think she'll be able to do that. I just don't think that asking her to do that the first month that she's in office would be, in my humble opinion, fair to her.
I would agree with that. I can only imagine. Do you think that it would be mainly getting the court for minors up and going initially, and then perhaps an adult court, or both? Or do you have any inkling of an idea if that particular court might be, or docket established first?
Well, if Julie Holt were still going to be the public defender in January, I would say that I think that the best initiative that could well serve quickly would be a juvenile crossover type of docket, and pilot that, work out all the whatever problems we might encounter, make sure we have all the proper resources in place. If I was going to be the public defender, that would be the request that I have made, that the chief judge is on board with. It's just a matter of we felt that it was appropriate to wait for the elections to see where we landed, and then look at things from there. So that's going to be my recommendation to Ms. McLean.
Okay, that would make sense. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay,
Chair
well, look-
Klug, could I
Good.
comment
Yes,
as well?
absolutely, Ms. Justice.
Hi, this is Gina Justice, Court Administrator for the 13th Circuit. I just wanted to add, with regard to the resource issue as it pertains to the Administrative Office of the Court, the problem-solving court, or the collection of problem-solving courts that are already established among the 13th Circuit are, as we sit now, underfunded. We do not have the perpetual means to allow stability. For example, our mental health court, both adult and juvenile, we're very much underserving the population of qualified court participants in that arena. And we are, though, very actively working with Hillsborough County to try to establish a stable means to acquire the funds over the long term. However, the focus has been the problem-solving courts that are already currently established. So I just wanted to put that on the record for clarification.
Looking ahead at our calendar, which we have not approved yet, we have meetings in, I guess, January and March and May as far as board meetings. So more likely it's going to be, the second or third meeting perhaps at the earliest. But we like to keep on, on the radar there. We don't want to lose track of this. I know it's very important to everyone we do this. So we'll wait until we have everyone has their feet on the ground here, they have a better understanding of what it's going to take and resources, et cetera. But we'll try to bring this back to the board the first 6 months or so, the next year.
Could I ask one question to Gina's point? We were told at one point that funding was not an issue to set up such a court.
So the crossover court, the crossover division that Ms. Holt mentioned is not currently established, but we'd all have to have the resources applicable. I do have an FTE resource that could be applied to it from a case management perspective, but currently the funding for treatment or services that might be provided to those individuals is around $30,000. Is that right, Mr. Parkinson?
It's significantly more than this. And when you wrap your head around the totality of the circumstances here, as you indicated, there are efforts underway right now to secure long-term funding for the specialty courts. And as a reminder for folks that are new to the commission, that includes the drug courts, adult mental health court, veterans treatment court, juvenile mental health court. So making sure that those continue. The comment that you made, Dottie, regarding funding, I think when court administration made that comment, they were referring to the workload on their part. But the reality is that all of these specialty courts rely on external services for the individuals going through the court. You mentioned Colonel Reyes, Veterans Treatment Court. That court is in a fairly unique situation where the bulk of the individuals going to the court have access to VA services. Not everyone, but most of them have access to VA services, so that's not a limitation. But when you get to adult drug court, juvenile mental health court, and some of the other more nuanced courts, it is a challenge linking those individuals to services. And that's really where the rubber meets the road here, is making sure that we have continuous services. One of the models that you've chronically mentioned is the Buffalo Treatment Court, which is a great model. I've done some research on it many times over the years, had a staff member visit it. 80% of the individuals going through the Buffalo Human Trafficking Court model actually are referred to mental health services. Mm-hmm. So making sure that we have services to send them to is a key part of making sure that we have longitudinal success on these specialty courts.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I know our community is robust with anti-trafficking organizations that could pick up a lot of that slack, that they have their own services that they are funded to do. So with our robust, and Misty can speak better to that, with the Tyler Court and services that they're referred to. I know the community has those services that they get funding to do, so it's not necessarily a funding issue with the court and all of their services, if that makes sense. Am I right on that, Misty?
Hi, Dottie. I can reflect back just to when my experience lies in Tyler Court. I know we might not choose that model in going forward or want to hear the input of everybody, but when we started Tyler Court, it was very grassroots. We had a head state attorney a head defense attorney that were at the table. We had a judge that donated her courtroom once a month to hear these cases. And our team actually writes the docket and the face sheets and does the reporting to the court, so we lift that off. But there has been a lot of judicial work, right? How do you catch the people that maybe weren't part of a particular operation but are coming through a single arrest to make sure that they're afforded the same opportunity in court? So I think they've navigated a lot of those issues within the TILA court. But I would say, we do not get any funding for TILA court currently. Sometimes that's hard because we see other courts where there's a lot of funding, but we do manage because everything we provide to the survivors is free of cost to them, which includes, the trauma therapy, residential programming, and it's not just, Selah Freedom that oversees it or Created that oversees it. It's a network of providers, and the survivor has the choice. Sometimes it's community-based, sometimes it's residential. And we work to connect them with whatever services are most appropriate for them.
Thank you. And I know Colonel Reyes has also indicated that in his viewpoint, the services that would be needed for victims and survivors of trafficking are pretty much the same services that the veterans need in the Veterans Treatment Court. And to, Mr. Parkinson's point, veterans, do have those VA services where survivors of human trafficking don't have that type of service. But the resources that are needed are very similar. Okay.
Good. Any more comments on that issue? Okay. And also, as we just read out, we have other strategies we identified. Any comments about those? Especially with education in the community, some of those issues. Do you have any comments about that? Okay. And we can revisit this later on, so maybe the idea was to have these goals, maybe every meeting we'll have these goals posted someplace, and we can revisit this from time to time, but we like to be able to use like the funding we have to accomplish some of these goals, and that's part of this. It looks like this particular issue with the court, I'm not sure that's something we could assist in funding, but that's a possibility. We'll explore that as well.
So, Mr. Chair, yes, we can look into the funding because we do have the, fiscal year 2025 funding available minus the 200,000 roughly that has already been approved for FKQ for their program that starts January. But perhaps an idea for a more robust discussion would be to bring this to the steering committee. And the next steering committee is in December, but it doesn't have to be at the December meeting because of the issues that Public Defender Holt brought up with having a new PD come in. But maybe some background conversations can be had. Maybe the steering committee can talk about things that when the new PD is ready, the steering committee will have the questions ready for that, for whoever the PD appoints. If Ms. McLean doesn't sit herself, and that it's just an idea that maybe the steering committee is a more appropriate place to have those detailed discussions.
Sure, absolutely. I think the steering committee would basically vet these issues before it comes to full board. But as far as trying to move it forward, we'd like to move it forward in perhaps the next 6 months. But we may have a number of discussions, like you're saying, and maybe the first one in December, but continuing on to the next couple of steering committees because before it goes to full board. That may not be until May. We have to make sure that everyone's on board with this. I know it's been a lot of comments in the past about it. It sounds like it's something that's very well, it's needed in the community. Just a matter of how do we get there. Okay. Good. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next goal. And this is for victim services, adults. And that's the goal is increase service provider capacity and enhance specialized advocacy. The strategies for that were trauma-informed systems changes to avoid re-traumatization, interventions and services provided at the court level for high-risk adults, and increase service provider capacity through funding. And to see if you have any comments about that particular goal and those strategies. Okay, and also, by the way, we could bring these up again during the steering committees if we want to further explore these goals and strategies. Okay, the next one is victim services children. Trauma-informed changes and increased system coordination and collaboration was the goal. The strategies for that goal: supporting specialized advocacy services, supporting specialized advocacy services during court proceedings, increased service provider capacity through funding, and interventions and services provided at the court level for high-risk youth. So you see those are very similar, both for victim services advocacy. Any comments about that one? Okay, and then we have housing for adults and housing for children, and I think that's something we identified the last year or two that was really, it's really needed, that we're having a little housing shortage, not just, in general, the whole population have had some housing issues, but specifically for survivors and victims of human trafficking. So the goal for adults is increase a variety of housing options. The strategies increase access to emergency, transitional, and supportive housing for young adults, create basic needs supply kits and distribute to all law enforcement agencies and community organizations that serve survivors in crisis in Hillsborough County, and explore housing options and services tailored for non-English speaking survivors. And any comments about that? So some of that is just, trying to have a survivor kit, supply kit. Those are very innovative things. I think that's happened in some other organizations. But these are things that we're looking at, once again, is having some funding available to help support these activities. No comments on that. I'll read the next one. It's housing for children. The goal is promotion and training for specialized foster care homes. And the strategies provide specialized training for foster families, advertise for more trauma-informed foster homes. I think we had some discussions about foster care was something that was, I think it's been utilized pretty well so far, and it's a good option. I think there's always a question about ideal housing situations, and we're trying to see how we can optimize the funding we do have for these types of situations. Any comments about that?
In terms of this particular strategy, have y'all considered including a representative from the Children's Network of Hillsborough County who basically is overseeing the foster care system? Because right now, I'm a vice chair for their board, and so I kind of tell them what we're doing, but not that I won't be watching you all on TV. That line of communication might not necessarily exist all the time. So have you contemplated perhaps or thought about that? And I don't know if someone else might want to comment on what I think the value of having them at the table is, but they certainly are the #1 player in Hillsborough County.
Yeah, tremendous value. I just left a meeting early. It was the SAFE Alliance, which is a Human Trafficking Alliance, and the Foster Care Alliance all came together for like a little sit-down communication. What are you doing? How can we help each other? So the communication is there in pockets, so I think it would be a great addition to this board to have someone from the foster care.
I agree significantly. I don't know what the history of whether they've been asked or not, because I've only been chief judge for a little over a year now. But I know that we meet with them in the anticipation of creating a court, because they would be very much involved, as they are very much involved in the dependency court, which where a crossover would, be a part of. So I think that them being a part of this board would definitely be important.
Would that be something that the Board of County Commissioners would have to approve and institute a new seat at the table?
Well, your ordinance and bylaws prescribe the members of the agencies, well, not the members specifically, but the agencies that have a place or a seat on this board. What is possible is that there is a provision that when, let's call it expert advice or specific knowledge is required, that you can call upon someone to not be a member, but have temporary, I'd have to pull up the bylaws to see exactly what it says, and I at this point, ask our deputy county attorney to step in, but we're having some technical issues with her. No, we're good? Okay, so Ms. Attorney Cromartie-Mincy, if you can weigh in. Like I said, I don't recall the specific language without pulling up the document, but there is a provision where you can bring someone in to, for the period of which you're looking at a specific issue. So that's the long and the short of having an additional member. Otherwise, if you want a permanent member, you would go from 19 to 20, which is an even number, which often you don't want to have on a board. And you would have to go to the Board of County Commissioners and ask for a change to the ordinance.
I know on other boards that I have sat on for the county, we can have like advisory boards, even for certain issues, like the Commission on the Status of Women. We have an advisory board for certain topics that we're working on, so if that goes along with what you're saying, or?
It would not, that would not be an advisory board, because that would mean that that person or that agency would then be a member to be a member of that board.
Okay,
But you can bring someone in to advise you, but it would be,
Not a-
say,
not a board.
at a steering committee,
Okay.
right, meeting, you would ask the Children's Home Network, or Children's Network of Hillsborough County, whether it's a staff member there or, a board member there, to join your steering committee meetings for X amount of time while you're discussing this issue. So they would be a guest member, maybe? That's not what we call it in the document, but if you give me a minute, I can pull that up.
So let me make a suggestion just to avoid all this other part of this discussion. It seems to me that either the chair or the chair of the steering committee, whoever, could just call Ms. Ballier, who is the CEO, and say, here's our strategy that we've developed, and get input from her as to whether or not maybe being a little bit more targeted about what's needed. Because specialized training for foster families, if I had to guess, there's probably some training that occurs now, if I had to guess. So maybe this needs to be targeted a little bit differently. Advertise for more trauma-informed foster homes. I know that there's a huge effort being made to enhance the quality of the foster homes that exist and to create additional foster homes, and that they're based really on the target that they have, the strategy that they have is homes that are identified for particular children with whatever challenges they might have. So if someone has acute medical issues, for instance, or acute mental issues, for instance, or, so I think that this might be something that is moving along through the Children's Network, and you might be comfortable with what they're doing. You might be able to just give them input about what your interest is, and maybe invite them to a meeting, maybe a couple of times a year, and say, hey, can you just give us an update as to what's happening, so that you don't have to go through a membership change. And you can also put her on a mailing list, obviously for minutes and things of that sort, so that she could continue to be aware. And I will speak to her, because we obviously have our own meeting next week, so I'll speak with her and talk to her about this, be more than happy to share the strategy, and be more than happy to tell her that someone will be calling her.
I do have the document in front of me from your approved bylaws in Article 2, Section 3, non-member participants / liaisons. The commission may appoint non-member participants and/or liaisons, persons who possess a certain skill or expertise on a specific topic the commission feels is necessary to conduct its business, to participate in commission or subcommittee meetings, but may not vote. To become a non-member participant and/or liaison, applicants shall shall submit an application/resume to staff at least 30 days prior to a scheduled regular commission meeting. Staff will vet all submitted applications and place qualified applicants on the agenda for the commission's consideration. Such appointment shall be by nomination and majority vote of the commission. Non-member participants and/or liaisons may serve a maximum of 1 year, but may be considered for additional years. And when it refers to commission in this sense, it means this commission, not the Board of County Commissioners. So that's your option, and I believe Mr. Parkinson would like to add to the conversation.
Just a couple comments. First of all, it's kind of a no-brainer that we need the CBC or DCF involved, seeing as DCF, Department of Children and Families, has really turned over the responsibility for administering that system to the CBCs. Someone from the CBC should be here. I also think back to the work the court administration did earlier this year to look at the actual prevalence of human trafficking survivors coming through our system, Circuit 13, specifically the adults and kids, and then the comparison and contrast that we did earlier this year in looking at the Tallahassee data. We know that 18 or 19 of those kids that are involved in the CBC every year are survivors of human trafficking. So we have a very nice target population there that if we're going to administer any future programs, we could focus on them to start, get the programs running, and iron out all the details. The other comment is Ms. Holt is absolutely right. They have multiple tiers of foster care. You have your general foster care, you have therapeutic foster care, where those foster care parents get additional training. Detective Aguiar, when he was looking at the issue of housing for survivors a few months back with the steering committee, one of the things that they realized is that it's very expensive, especially when you're looking at a group home or a brick and mortar operation. But really an efficient way to do this is with another subset of a therapeutic group home model, where those therapeutic group home parents get additional training on how to deal with survivors. So it makes brilliant sense to do this. The other wonderful thing, and I'm saying this, and I'd say that even if the chair of the CBC's board wasn't here, is they have a lot of money from Tallahassee. I know it's never enough money, but they have a lot of money, and they are able to administer and move those monies around to serve specific target populations that pop up. And this is specifically a target population that has high need and is often challenging to place. So I think there could be real synergy with getting them here and quite frankly, getting some pretty quick action for the target population.
Excellent discussion. Any more comments about that? I think that,
It's my last hurrah for this commission.
yes, I think, go ahead, Mr. Aguiar.
Hi. Tony Aguiar, Tampa Police Department. I was just thinking back about when we obviously did the strategic planning, and the thing that we discussed most about that was actually funding recruitment efforts, not necessarily changing how people are trained in the system, or even really addressing needs for changing people, or changing like training that people or foster homes specifically have, but actually funding some sort of program to recruit new foster homes. Because as we discussed in the strategic plan, that's an issue we have in law enforcement, not just in human trafficking, but just in issues involving children and actually placement of them, is that we don't have enough foster homes, we don't have enough places for them. So I just want to make sure that in future discussions we have about that we're actually talking about the need is not necessarily training foster people or identifying the different programs and needs, but the fact that we just don't have the number of foster homes that we need. Okay. So I think, I just don't want to lose sight on that. That's really, I think, what we need is to promote just recruitment and thinking about the best ways to do that, whether that is through advertising or through, recruiting and a grassroots effort, like going to churches and with speakers and recruiting people. Maybe using people that are already in the foster care system to kind of explain what it's like to be a foster parent and, why it's important, that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much all I wanted to address was just making sure we don't forget the kind of the background of why that was even brought up at
If
the
I-
strategic planning.
Are you talking about group homes, or are you talking about individual homes? Because that's going to be a DCF kind of, partnering with DCF is probably going to be where you have to kind of end up. But is it for a group home? Because I know we're real short on group homes.
Well, it's both. Obviously, we're really short on group homes, but one of the things that we addressed in strategic planning was just recruiting more people in the foster homes. I think everybody would agree that the children in need do best when they're in a foster home as opposed to a group home, where they have the structure of a family, someone who's there that cares for the more individualized care and that kind of thing. What I notice, obviously, in law enforcement is that we have a real need for foster homes and that kind of relationship for our kids. Because the group homes, I'm sure there are some successes, but there's certainly a lot of issues that come along with that, and we see that commonly. So I just wanted to make sure that when we talk about that, we use our funds. Like this year, we created an advertising campaign to, basically just highlight human trafficking in the area and tell people how they could report and that sort of thing. And one of the things we discussed at strategic planning is maybe using some of those advertising funds to recruit people into the foster care system, to be foster parents, not just targeting people who are the victim of human trafficking, but our target populations, which is just our at-risk youth, especially those that are females. So I think, obviously, conversation with DCF would be important, but we really should focus on what are the strategies in recruiting foster parents and how can we help fund that? What kind of programs exist, or do we need to create something to kind of address that issue? I also think it's something that, if we do fund a program like that, it's something that, there's numbers that can be associated with it, so we can see from a year-to-year basis if a program like that helped actually increase the amount of foster parents.
I apologize, but I have
All right,
to,
thanks, Judge.
sorry about that.
Appreciate you attending.
If I may, Jennifer Glaster, Redefining Refuge, and that's the specific group that we work with, and I was actually in the same group with Tony. And just from experience, I don't have any studies or anything like that, is that the young ladies that we've seen the most success with going on into their 20s have been when they've been placed with a older couple and they are the only child in the situation. When I say older, I'd say in their 50s, 60s. And so really honing in to look for those specific type of people. That there are a lot of people out there who are retired and they don't know that it's an option for them to be a foster parent. They think that they themselves have kind of aged out of the system. So I think that's kind of one of the things that we were talking about when it comes to advertising, kind of say, hey, this is available to you. This is, if you're looking for something to really enrich your life, this is something that that you may want to look into with you and your spouse or you and your partner. So that.
Yes, Mr. Markinson.
I think it might be helpful for the group to get a brief presentation in the future on how foster care works. In a previous life, I worked for the Department of Children and Families, and I had the opportunity to monitor hundreds of foster care homes. I can tell you there's a great diversity in the types of foster parents that are recruited and that continue to provide foster care. We've got everything from people that are starting right off in life as a couple to retired social workers that have expertise in human trafficking and everything in between. I think the important thing to understand is that there is a specific process that goes into matching a youth that needs to be fostered with a home and with the other kids that are in it. This matching process is often a challenge because stakeholders here, we have 1,000 beds. But in reality, when that need for foster care comes up, you have to match the youth that needs the services with a home that is appropriate for the trauma that that kid has experienced. If you have any other youth that have experienced similar trauma, youth that even to situations where kids are in rival gangs. So, that might limit the actual usable beds down to 300 or 400, where we think we have 1,000. So I think first it would be helpful to get a presentation from the CBC and DCF on how that is currently operating. And then, recruiting would be helpful, and they do recruiting, and they use a lot of media to do that, but also how they can recruit for folks that are more specialized in some of these therapeutic needs, I think will be helpful. The other thing, and this has come up in past meetings, is have some kind of differential like they already do for therapeutic foster homes. Therapeutic foster homes tend to make more money or get paid more for their additional specialty services. And this might even need to be another tier of therapeutic group homes for folks that are specialized in the trauma that HT survivors go through, but also the special challenges that the parents, the foster parents, will have to take to make sure that abusers aren't trying to track down and pursue the HT survivor. These are things that run-of-the-mill parents may not be cognizant of. Social media and the other electronic forms of communication that are often used to recruit and track down survivors. So I do think, recruiting helps, but we also need this specialty training. And then on the back end, and Ms. Holt knows this, they recruit a lot of foster parents every year, but a lot of foster parents stop being foster parents after a year, after a couple bad experiences with the system. And I think both the dependency system and the delinquency system and the HT system need to do better to make sure that the foster parents have the necessary supports to be successful and can help their youth be successful. So it's not just putting somebody in a home, but making sure that that home has the necessary wraparound services, and not just for the kids, but also for the parents. That means respite services when they need to take a break, bringing in external counselors when they need help. So something to consider.
And one more thing, all your points absolutely excellent, is that we want to remember human trafficking, although I specifically work with youth that are sex trafficked. We're also talking about there are labor trafficked kids out there who may need a foster home, all sorts of domestic servitude, things of that nature that maybe, once again, to Rob's point, you're looking at a totally different scenario, whereas if you had one of our girls, we'd want her placed by herself would be preferable. You have labor trafficking, you're looking at maybe you have a group of siblings and we would, that need to be placed together. So definitely just to say that, yes, your points are, there are so many different dynamics that go into when you're looking for a home for a child that has been labeled HT, human trafficked, that it almost becomes a detriment to that child, unfortunately, in the system, and because they're so limited. And I think just what we would like to see is where we've got more to choose from, basically. Thank you.
Okay, as far as that particular issue, perhaps we should take this to the December steering committee. And Ms. Multulin, when's the next steering committee? What date is that in December?
I believe it's December 13th, but let me double check.
Okay. Do you think we have enough time to get those presentations by that date?
Let's-
Yeah, steering committee. Mm-hmm. December 19th.
December 19th at 1.
Yes, December 19th. The 13th is a different board that I
Okay,
administer.
on Thursday,
But
right.
yes, December 19th at 1 o'clock is the next subcommittee meeting. And, certainly that is the place to get more into the weeds, as we say. So I don't know about a formal presentation, if we can arrange that with the Children's Network, as Rob had described,
As well as DCF.
or just further establish, work through
Okay.
the parameters of what it is you want to do, what it is you want to see, possible funding for it. One thing that did cross my mind when you were talking about, when Detective Aguilar brought up the advertising possibilities, we will have, FKQ is under contract now with a certain set of parameters and scope of work. They have, a contract that'll start in January. That has not gone to the Board of County Commissioners yet. So I'd have to discuss with our Director of Procurement, Scott Stromer. We might have the ability to alter the scope of work to include that, or you might want to look at, a totally different strategy of advertising. I would caution you, though, that That budget of yours for fiscal year '25 will get chipped away. Something else we can discuss, or you can discuss at the subcommittee meeting, kind of an outline of a budget. I know that Santiago Carrata is not here today. He's traveling, as is Jolyn Loki, his alternate. But I know he's been an advocate for establishing a budget and for trying to set aside funds to meet the goals that you have. And Mr. Parkinson has discussed before about leveraging funds, and there are funds available perhaps from the state or federal government that, or other nonprofits that you could tap into to leverage the funding that you do have.
Ms. Holton?
Just to try and bring this in for a landing, I would recommend that you have Ms. Ballier come December 19th. It'll be easier. Hopefully, she's available. If not, she can probably send her director of programs or something of that sort to give everybody an idea of what it is that how the foster homes work. That's number one. Number two, they have an advertising budget, and they even have an advertising company under contract that we do press releases, we do campaigns and things like that. Obviously, the big focus, like over the last year, the big focus has been, frankly, trying to get more children adopted, and we're setting a record on that. And some of the foster homes some of the foster parents that stop being foster parents is because they're adopting the children, because there's been some efforts to try and have those numbers go up. So kids that are being taken out of the home, those numbers are decreasing. Children that are being adopted are increasing. But I think Ms. Ballier can give you a good overview of both the advertising aspect of life, and I'm sure she'd be more than happy to, incorporate the strategy that you're trying to work on into the advertising budget that they already have, because obviously it would benefit them. And the opportunity to have an interaction with law enforcement to really hear what your problems are that you're seeing on the streets would obviously benefit the Children's Network. So I think that having her first, and then if she needs to bring DCF in, I think she'd be the first one to tell you that. So that would be what I would recommend.
With the chairperson's permission, I would volunteer to contact Terry and Kim Williams and let them know that their board chair highly recommended that they come present at the December meeting.
Absolutely. Please do so. So at the December meeting, and hopefully the vice chair could be at the meeting as well and attend that meeting. So I think we'll do that first, and then as far as with respect to the victims court, et cetera, maybe we'll do that at the following steering committee a couple months later. So let's try to address that issue, and these are all things that we can help fund. And so as part of this is making sure that we're able to expend the funds that we have available to us for projects like this, and get the ball moving. Great. Excellent discussion on that. Any more comments on that issue? I'll move on to the next goal if not. Okay, the last goal is on community awareness and prevention programs. And that's the goal is educate Hillsborough County businesses and schools to prevent human trafficking for a safer, stronger, and resilient community. And the strategies behind that: educational awareness program, the reinstatement of Hillsborough Heroes, training at-risk youth population, providing educational programs for staff and youth, identifying and preventing human trafficking, implement human trafficking assemblies, and coordinated curriculum prevention programs at middle schools, high schools, and post-secondary. And the other strategy on that is host community awareness programs, develop event, conference, implement a speakers bureau and celebrity spokesperson, evolved the Don't Buy a Tampa Bay campaign, social media, digital billboards and buses, et cetera.
Okay, just to add to my discussion here today. You might want to have a presentation from someone from the Hillsborough County school system, because we just recently had a meeting with them on something totally different. However, they were telling us about everything that they're doing within the schools on human trafficking. So you might want to just get them to have a little presentation. I'm just trying to say that maybe we should talk to the people before I know these are your strategies, but
Yes.
this will help us probably fine tune some of these strategies. And HT is a big part of what the school system says that they're working on. I'm not vouching for that.
Okay.
I'm not vouching for that. What I'm saying is you might want to have them make a presentation.
believe it or not, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, they have a spot
They do.
here, and they have not attended any meetings except for a press conference that we had.
They have a seat at this table.
So I would suggest,
We have an alternate who's attended, yeah.
Yes,
I would
the school
suggest-
district's alternate,
Yeah, she's
Kristen
been to-
Davis, the government relations official from the school district, has attended. The school board member, who is the primary member, has not.
I'd rather not comment on that. I'd rather say that if the chair, or if Mr. Parkinson were to make a phone call to Mr. Ayers and make a special request, that I believe that that would be appropriate.
Could I say too, I until recently was sitting on that human trafficking task force for the school district. And, you know, they have made a lot of groundwork. I don't want to say anything I shouldn't, but I think it might be best to have Mr. Ayers, Superintendent Ayers, come and
Okay.
make a presentation on it. But I know there's been a lot of traction in our school district. I know, too, that there's an outside group that would like to come into Hillsborough County and do major work in our school district on human trafficking. I think that's in the works, and that's all I'm going to say about that as well.
Okay, we will contact the superintendent and pursue that. I think I was one, I think probably many of you attended the Great American Teach-In today, and that was a great experience for these children. And I always have an opportunity to educate them. I was in particular talking about the port and port jobs and opportunities, but I think that the school system should be receptive to this. I think it's just a matter of getting the right people involved. Okay. Any other comments on that?
From what I understand, the school district has a human trafficking task force, and we have members who are on this task force that are, or this commission that are on that task force.
I wouldn't call it a task force, it's more like a committee.
Okay.
They call it a task force.
So perhaps, along with Superintendent Ayers, we can have whoever chairs or staffs or has involvement with that committee.
Board Member Gray, I
Thank
think,
you.
is heading up that
Okay.
committee.
So that's another possibility.
And you can certainly reach out to John Newman, because I believe that between the officers that work for John Newman, and at least, I don't know about TPD. I don't know about TPD. I do know that the resource officers for the sheriff's office are engaged with the school system, and that they play a role in some of the human trafficking aspects of life. I don't know about TPD, because I haven't heard, but,
SROs being trained?
yeah, right?
We're working on it.
Okay, that's my son.
We teach them every year.
No, and I think that that's part of what people don't realize sometimes is that, you know, you're constantly hiring, there's constantly new people. You have people that retire that are SROs that then have to come in and then have to be trained. So, I mean, since I have that turnover aspect of my life, I know what it requires. I just think it's a matter of, we should know, or we should at least have people stand in front of us and tell us what it is they're doing, so that we can then fine-tune these strategies to say, this is what we would like to do and how we would like to assist you and partner with you. Because we certainly can't do any of this by ourselves. It requires the partnership. And going into the school system, as I'm sure Dottie knows this because we hear it all the time, you're taking away from educational time that's mandatory, and here we are. But as it relates to children, putting up signs in the bathroom is not enough, and we all know that. And so I think it's a matter of hearing what they're doing, what their plan is, and then finding a way to partner. That's what I would recommend, because I think you can fine-tune some of these things. And you may find that you're 95% happy with what the Children's Network is doing, and you only have to do this part of it, because they are going to have a new funding formula, and there's a possibility that we won't be funded as well as we were funded, and so obviously they would look for partners, and we are looking for partnerships. So I think it's something that we can do. It's just fine tuning it.
Yes. And these strategies are things that we came up during that lab, and they should be fine-tuned. I mean, I know sometimes we're grappling with the right words to say. And so I think we would like to be able to spend some more time on that as well.
In the school district, our representatives were not here when we did the strategic planning.
Right. Good, okay. Those were the goals and strategies, and we can continue working on those, like I said, especially the next couple of steering committees. You know, we have a work cut out for us to continue following up on those issues, and we'll do that. And I'll, either I or Rob will contact the superintendent and get his attention on this issue with respect to the schools.
Chair
Okay.
Klug, would
Yes.
it be
Mm-hmm.
in the steering committee that we would recommend changing some language and verbiage in some of
Oh,
the
absolutely.
strategies?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, ma'am. Mhm. Okay, we're going to move on to the staff report. And Ms. Montaglione will give us a couple updates here.
Thank you. Starting with the calendar, the proposed 2025 calendar is the last page in your agenda packets. The first meeting of the full board in January would be January 23rd, 2025. It would be helpful if you voted on this calendar today, so I can post that meeting when the time comes to the county's website for public notice. It'll be here before we know, in a blink of an eye. I know sometimes it's difficult to look that far ahead into your calendars and your schedules to look at all of 2025 and see when these meetings are, but generally, it keeps the same rhythm and pattern as we've had in the past roughly 2 years of the Thursday at 1 o'clock. So hopefully, all of you have that already marked on your calendars to be here Thursday at 1 o'clock. It does, you know, it's almost every month there's a meeting if you are on the steering committee. And legislative and judicial committee meets intermittently because of it follows the legislative session. So legislative session doesn't start in full until March. Committees are starting next week. However, as we've been reminded before, there is not an opportunity for this commission to lobby our representatives in Tallahassee because you are appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, and it is the Board of County Commissioners who sets the legislative agenda for the county. As individual citizens, you are free to talk to your representatives, but you cannot say that you represent the Commission on Human Trafficking. And we also have a variety of conflicts of interests from the members who sit here who aren't able to, even if you could, they professionally cannot. So that's the calendar. Again, if I believe we still have a quorum, if we could take a vote on the calendar, you can always change it.
Motion to approve. Motion to approve the
Second.
proposed calendar.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Great.
Thank you. The next item is update on the mural. There have been some setbacks. As you know, we had 2 hurricanes, and the artist, Leah, I was just informed a couple of days ago, had some personal setbacks of her own. So hopefully, we will have sketches to consider at the steering committee on December 19th. I know we have an art committee as well, but the art committee doesn't need to meet in person. I can send out the sketches. We can do a quick Teams call. And then if the art committee is okay with them, then bring them to the December 19th meeting. If the art committee can't get together, even on Teams, or the sketches aren't ready, in time, then we're looking at the 19th or February 27th. After we have approved sketches, there is an entire Florida Department of Transportation process to follow and go through. So that will be the next step. So first the sketches, then the FDOT approval process. Once we get FDOT approval on the actual sketches and the location of the columns, because the columns have to be inspected for structural issues to be repaired or refaced or whatever needs to be done by FDOT, then we move on to the next step, which would be the maintenance agreement. So it's going to be a while before brush hits concrete on that installation. The last item is the member update. We have 3 vacancies, but I have applications for all 3. The alternate for the state attorney's office, Deputy Chief Boulos, is the new deputy chief. So she will be joining the board once her application is confirmed by the Board of County Commissioners. I have an incomplete application for the alternate for the religious institution seat, so that is still open for application. If anyone has someone in mind they'd like to recommend for the religious institutions alternate member, certainly they can go ahead and send me an application. The other is, as was mentioned by the public defender a little earlier, the public defender's office will be appointing Ms. Antina Mobley as the primary member. Ms. McLean's office has already indicated that she will be the member. I do have the application, just waiting to put it on a Board of County Commissioners meeting for certification of her application. What I don't have is the alternate for the PD's office yet. So we'll work through that. Ms. Holt?
I'll double check with Ms. McLean tomorrow, and
Okay.
I'll have her contact you, because I thought, my impression was that she was going to sit as I do and have Ms. Mobley be the alternate. I may be wrong.
If you can clarify that, that would be wonderful, but that was the last correspondence I had.
Sure, I'll check with her tomorrow morning.
Fabulous.
Mr. Parkinson will remind me.
I love it that you're putting a lot of things on his to-do list. That's just,
I have for 32 years.
That's
He's
great.
going to miss me.
he's going to miss you.
He's going to miss me.
And lastly, on membership, at the BOCC organizing meeting, it was decided that all the commissioners would keep their previous assignments. So Commissioner Cameron Cepeda will remain as the primary member and Commissioner Miller as her alternate. And that's all I have. Yes, Commissioner Christine Miller, yes.
Okay, any old business or any new business? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to bring up, quite a few months ago, we had a presentation from the USF Tip Lab and the Bright Project. I'm happy to sit on that advisory board as well, but they are doing incredible things, building this statewide platform on human trafficking. So right now, the platform is for service providers, but eventually they want to build it out to include all things human trafficking, including commissions such as ours and task forces across the state. But I just want to encourage any organization who has not connected with the Bright Network, who's doing service provision, to go ahead and contact the Bright Network, and I'm happy to help make that connection to be vetted and to be placed on this platform, because it's gonna change the landscape of how service providers are able to find each other and actually connect victims and survivors to services. Just wanted to bring that update.
Information, thank you. Okay, any other comments? I think next meeting, I think we have election of officers, and I would say that
Chair Clark?
I've been 2 years, someone else?
We have, is that Member Rose, is that you?
No, that's actually Deborah. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can, thanks.
Hi, Chair Clark, Vice Chair, Committee Member Good afternoon. I've been attending virtually all this time. This is Deborah Cromartie-Menchie from the County Attorney's Office. I just wanted to confirm, I know that there was a question about being able to receive expert information from either a member or someone who might be able to attend one of our meetings. I know that was a couple of comments ago, but we've had some technical difficulties. Thanks to Mr. Lindsay with HTV, I'm able to make my comment. But I believe what was mentioned to you by Ms. Monteleone was absolutely correct. The commission may appoint non-member participants and or liaisons to participate in subcommittee members. These people cannot vote. And as you all know or are aware already, the commission may by a majority vote of the entire membership of the commission appoint ad hoc subcommittees that these non-voting liaisons may participate in and share their knowledge. So, and beyond that, if you all are wanting this particular person to be a member who can vote, then as Ms. Monteleone mentioned earlier, there would need to be a change in the membership count in the ordinance, which has to go before the board. So thank you for your time. And Ms. Julian Holt, happy retirement, and you will be missed.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And that's all. Yes, that's all my comments.
Good.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for that clarification. Thanks. I was going to mention so that I think the January meeting is election officers, and I would encourage anyone to, put their hat in the ring for chairman and vice chairman. I think Ms. Holt's retiring, and I think 2 years is long enough for anyone to serve this position.
Mr. Chair, I did want to just mention that we did not have anyone register for public comment, either online or in person.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, with that, a motion to adjourn. Thanks. Good, thank you.
Second?
Great. Meeting's adjourned, and see you at the steering committee, hopefully next month, and then the board meeting on January.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you.